World Pride event called Cabinet of Curiosity. And in this show, as you can see in the footage, a lot of the pieces were constructed of butterflies that are in frames, in cloches, and in mannequins. So a lot of my idea comes from the whole idea of the Cabinet of Wonders, which basically connect towards the idea of colonialism when they went to other countries and basically started collecting items that was considered oddities and strange for them. So to me, it was a very good linking theme towards sexuality and especially queer of colors. So the butterflies that you're seeing are actually butterflies that are templates of butterflies that are indigenous to the Philippines. So I would search certain butterflies that were actually indigenous in the Philippines, and then I would collect Google images of gay porn images. So in a way, the mass dictates my material that I'm using, and almost 90% of the images that I've collected were masculine, muscle, homonormative representation of the male queer body. So to me, it was essential to speak about the invisibility of the otherness, and that's why I wanted to link that idea of the curiosity towards the otherness. And the costume that you're seeing here right now, there was two of them actually from the show. I think it will be colonizer. In the video, you see the hybrid Queen Elizabeth dress that's also crafted from gay pornography and paper, which I performed at the Art Gallery of Ontario with Catherine McTavish. And it was a way for me to kind of construct something that consumed myself within this armature that represents colonialism, but kind of reinterpreting it into this thing, this construction that I kind of hide myself into. And I started with the butterflies, and then I kind of veered off to other taxidermy birds, animals that are indigenous to the Philippines as well, culturally. But what struck me with the butterfly is actually I remember there's a political party, there's a gay political party in the Philippines called Ladlad, and their symbol is actually the butterfly. And Ladlad means to unfurl. So to me, it was kind of important to comment towards not only the political stance back home, but also symbolically the butterfly talks about transformation and change and things that are in flight. Yes, it's about opening up in a way.
Oh, I was just gonna ask what your current work or what you're thinking of in the future working on. Do you have like a new project?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, lately I have been collecting. It's veering off away from paper, but I still go back and forth. Lately, I've been collecting a lot of antique artifacts, specifically teacups, and I'm creating a series of rice about whitewash and talking about Rice Queen as this idea of self in the queer community, but also bleaching the rice with soy sauce in different degrees of darkness and recreating the patterns that I would see in those antique artifacts and covering them with rice. So it really kind of talking about that whole idea of again, it's still that kind thematical theme of the object and the curiosity. So to me, a lot of and I like to play with items that are heavy loaded with colonialism and post-colonialism, and kind of how to deconstruct or decolonialize the actual materiality itself. So that's the latest few pieces that I'm working on, but it feels like the butterflies and the birds and the cockfight, they're still, you know, in creation, because they're still kind of like moving from one gallery to one gallery to one gallery. So I'm starting to venture off to different materials, and I find that because my study was in drawing and painting, and I remember I couldn't defend why I'm painting. I'm like, so, and to me it was too much of a distance from me. The fact of the execution of historically painting within the canon, I was removed from it. As a queer of color, I found that if I use pre-existing material that's already heavy loaded with messages, such as rice. There's one piece that I did where I actually used a lot of whitewashing product. I would use skin bleaching soap to the actual items and some of the collage that I made, and things that would make your nose straight or contact lens. So it's always commenting towards the materials, which is full of messages rather than paint, right? So I like that idea of exploring different materiality that has cultural reference in it. I have not actually, no.
Would you ask you?
It would be interesting. So far, I've shown in Berlin, in Paris, in UK, Canada. In Berlin, they like it. It's something normal for them, you know, the penis, the risque, the better, right? But yeah, and what's great though is this is the first time they're actually shown in the U.S. This is my first piece is here at the Outfest, Outsider Fest, you know. So it's good.
You know, there's two pieces that are on the screen. The cockfight,
Yeah.
which is very involved construction, and then there's this ghost-like nature, colonial woman or queen.
Queen Elizabeth.
She is. Can you talk a little bit about both of those?
Oh yes. Let me see if I can find a clip of that, which is this. I'll just
Yes.
put it down on low. So what it is, I started to work basically at this point in my crafting. I wasn't really doing the cabinet of curiosity yet. What I was doing is I was playing more about the sacred and the profane, the whole idea of Catholicism. I've done pieces of shrines crafted from acorn and reliquaries that I would reconstruct that comes from the Philippines. So all of those kind of religious, kind of colonial aspects starts to kind of envelop itself to talk about colonialism, but also hybridity, because you can see there's the Kali, the mask, the demon mask, and the cross. So to me, it was kind of reinterpreting the colonizer and the colonized at the same time. How can I play with those two imageries and combine it into one? And this, I think the surreal part of it to me was it has to be a performative piece where I kind of envelop myself inside this costume.
That's you inside.
Yes, which I performed in at the it was one of those performative where I constantly have to hide myself. So it was more symbolic to kind of imagine myself to be erased. So it's that idea of the cultural identity being erased, but also growing up being told about that whole idea of whitewashing and assimilating and transformation. And I think I say to myself, if I'm if I have grown up in the Philippines, I would be a different person probably rather than having to grow up in Canada. So to me, it was that struggle between the duality of the diasporic change, my childhood in the Philippines, and then my adult queer life in Canada. So there was this kind of loss to me, where I remember going back home, I feel out of place, but at the same time, I still don't feel at home completely in Canada. So what becomes this kind of like diasporic body where you don't feel like you fit into any tangible land or space. So to me, and that's why we did the segment in CBC called Art is My Country, where a lot of diasporic artists talks about belonging within their work, within their artwork.
Being white.
Yeah, that was very specific as well. Again, it was the whole ideal of the homonormative reconstruction evolving itself in the work as well. And a lot of my work also was heavily influenced by the queer theorist David L. Eng, who wrote the book Racial Castration, the Feminization of Queer Asians in America, where he really talks about the idea of exoticization, fetishism. So I kind of like just started to pull that idea out and constantly question the idea of the otherness as well, and what constitute as different. So it's always that kind of struggle, depending where you are, right? It's kind of, if you go to another country, who becomes the outsider? So it's really about the different perspectives. The butterflies is so beautiful. No, I don't like that. God will not like that. So to me, it was, the reaction is more fascinating to me because the artwork never changed. It's the people's perspective that changes depending the location of how far they're seeing the object itself. So I love the idea of that duality of reading the piece from up close and afar. So it's really becoming more of a comment towards their own perspective rather than the artwork sometimes itself too. So that was the great kind of thing. But and I have stuff before where it's like a big huge collage on the wall, and then some Catholic nut started ripping it, tearing it down. So to me, it was like, well, that's nice. That's actually could become part of the work itself. The labor part of it, as well, echoing back home, the whole idea of in the Philippines of people making something from nothing to survive, and the whole, but also the tactile of arts and crafts back in the Philippines about the weaving, and it's going back to that whole idea of the indigenous Filipino, that kind of craft things, or even just the whole idea when I did the series of the cutouts, I was echoing the notion of the tattooing, So it was commenting towards that idea of the appropriation of cultural practices that we see now today. I remember back home, my uncles used to watch the cockfight, and I found it quite barbaric. The cocks are fighting until they die, and to me, it was indicative to my own struggle to kind of belong and to kind of fight to the death, and that whole idea of masculinity within the Filipino culture. Growing up, I used to get beaten if I act too gay, or like say you're a man. I'm a man. So it was that kind of painful struggle for me. You doing that piece itself, but also again that idea of almost painful remembrance of my past, but also the future of growing up in the queer community in Toronto, which still, I remember a couple of months ago, me and my friends would go to a gay bar, and then I would hear someone. For me, it's always been a struggle for me. It's like, how feminine can I be, or what is acceptable? And to me, that kind of vulnerability, I think, also shows within the work as well, because I struggle through that daily. How do I need to present myself? And then I catch myself on the video, and I say to myself, "Oh, really? I acted like that? Was that too gay? Was that or exactly?" And I catch myself doing that, and the sad fact is it's really acknowledging that I do that to myself, but also questioning why. Why do I have the urge to work on? So I cherish those pain and those struggle, and just create something out of it. Yeah. I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you so much.